The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension, an undercurrent of whispered conversations and cautious glances exchanged among the onlookers. Every seat was occupied. The case had attracted attention from every corner of the city, from seasoned reporters to concerned citizens hoping, desperate, even, for a sign that justice still meant something. At the defense table, a group of uniformed police officers sat in a tight row. Their faces bore the kind of arrogance that came from years of impunity. They laughed quietly amongst themselves, their expressions smug, their postures relaxed. These men had faced accusations before and had always walked away unscathed. Why should today be any different? At the center of them all was Officer Jackson Cole. For more than a decade, Cole had been a dominant figure within the police force, but not for his valor or dedication to justice. His name was synonymous with manipulation, exploitation, and a cunning ability to bend the law to suit his needs. He sat with his arms crossed, a self-satisfied grin spreading across his face, as though he were already picturing his life after this hearing, a life where he remained untouchable. To his right, Sergeant Derek Marshall leaned in and whispered something that made Cole chuckle. Across from them, Detective Sean Riley and Paul Granger exchanged a nod, confident that the show was already over before it had truly begun. They believed they owned this city, and perhaps they did. But one person sitting across the courtroom wasn't ready to let them win so easily. Prosecutor Elena Matthews stood silently at her table. She didn't smile. Her dark brown eyes scanned the room with a calm intensity that belied the storm of emotions she kept under control. Unlike the officers, she knew the depth of the suffering their actions had caused. She had seen it in the files, in the photographs of broken families, in the trembling hands of those who came forward to testify in secret. And even more hauntingly, she had heard it in the quivering voices of mothers whose sons were now lost to a system twisted by corruption. But in a city where corruption had become a language spoken fluently by many in power, Matthews understood that evidence alone wasn't always enough. She had spent months gathering every scrap of proof she could. She had built a case so meticulously detailed that even the most jaded observer would feel its weight. Yet she still knew that justice was never guaranteed. Not here. Still, she had a plan. The judge, Harold Jenkins, adjusted his glasses and surveyed the room. His face was a careful mask, betraying none of his thoughts. He cleared his throat, and a hush swept over the courtroom as he began to speak. After reviewing all presented evidence and carefully considering the arguments made in this courtroom, he began, his voice solemn and deliberate. I regret to inform the court that the prosecution has failed to provide sufficient proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The words seemed to echo in the stillness. Therefore, all charges against the defendants are dismissed. The sound of his gavel striking would punctuated the moment. At the defense table, the officers erupted in quiet, triumphant laughter. They clapped each other on the back, their relief palpable, their confidence swelling like a tide. Jackson Cole turned to Derek Marshall, his grin widening. "I told you," Cole murmured smugly. "This was nothing. They'll never touch us. We run this city." They began rising from their seats, ready to walk out into the world as free men once more, ready to remind anyone who dared oppose them that they were beyond the reach of consequences. But Elena Matthews remained still. She didn't move. Her face was unreadable, her eyes fixed on Judge Jenkins as though she had anticipated this outcome from the very beginning. Slowly, she reached into the inside pocket of her blazer. The motion was deliberate, controlled. Something about it shifted the energy in the room. The officers' celebration faltered. Their eyes flicked toward her. A frown creased Jackson Cole's brow. From her pocket, Elena pulled out a small badge. Its polished surface gleamed under the unforgiving fluorescent lights of the courtroom as she set it down on the prosecutor's table with a sharp, deliberate sound. Metal against wood. A sound that sliced through the silence. The room froze. Every eye turned toward her as she spoke. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'd like to introduce myself properly," she said, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of authority that commanded attention. "My name is Elena Matthews. And I'm not just a state prosecutor. She paused, letting the words sink in. I am the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. The reporters in the back scrambled to steady their cameras. Officers Cole, Marshall, Riley, and Granger stared at her, the color draining from their faces. Jackson Cole's confident smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Even Judge Jenkins faltered, his gavel quivering in his hand. I had a feeling this would happen. Elena continued smoothly. That's why I made sure this case was bigger than this courtroom. She turned toward the back of the room and gave a small nod. The heavy wooden doors swung open instantly. A team of federal agents in dark suits entered with precise, purposeful steps. Their badges glinted in the light as they took their positions, weapons holstered but ready, their eyes sharp and watchful. You see, Elena said as she turned back toward the officers, while you were busy celebrating, my team was busy working. Her voice was unwavering, each word a hammer blow. This case wasn't just about what happened in this courtroom. We have recorded conversations, bank statements, shell company transactions, and sworn testimonies from honest officers who refused to be a part of your corruption. We have enough evidence to bring federal charges against all of you. The officers remained frozen, but the fear was now visible, like cracks spreading through glass. And this time, Elena finished. There is no escape. Jackson Cole's hands, once so steady and sure, now trembled as the agents approached. You can't do this, he stammered. The judge just dismissed the case. Elena's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. This court may have let you go, she said, but the United States government won't. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on Cole's. You are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, racketeering, and multiple counts of misconduct under federal law. And trust me, federal prison isn't nearly as forgiving as the system you've manipulated for years. One by one, the officers were restrained, their wrists bound in cold, unforgiving steel. The same steel they had so callously used to shackle innocent lives. Their bravado had evaporated, stripped away like armor, dissolving in acid. Cole's arrogance dissolved into panic. His head snapped around, looking for an exit that no longer existed. This is impossible, he muttered. No, Elena replied, her voice low. It's justice. For the first time in years, Cole looked afraid. He stared at her, wide-eyed, as the agents guided him toward the door. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. As they passed, a woman from the gallery stepped forward. She was small, frail even, but her eyes burned with gratitude. Tears shimmered on her cheeks as she whispered, "Thank you." Elena nodded. "Justice may take time," she said gently, "but it always finds its way." Outside the courthouse, the sky was painted with streaks of amber and crimson as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Elena stood on the courthouse steps, surveying the crowd that had gathered. These were the people who had lived in fear for years. Now, they stood tall, hopeful, reborn by the sight of justice served. A reporter pushed to the front of the crowd. "Director Matthews," he called, "what do you say to those who believe justice can never truly be served?" She turned toward the camera. Her voice was firm, unshaken. Justice is not an illusion. It's a promise, one that stands unbroken, no matter how many try to bury the truth. No matter how long it takes, the truth will always come to light. The people deserve honesty, integrity, and accountability, and it is our duty to make sure they get nothing less. Her gaze swept the crowd. As long as there are those willing to stand against injustice, justice will prevail. The cameras flashed. The city seemed to exhale, as though it had been holding its breath for far too long. And deep within the cracks of the corruption that had ruled for so long, fear now spread like wildfire. No longer could the guilty hide behind their power, their wealth, or their influence. The illusion of invincibility had been shattered. Justice had arrived, not quietly, but as a roaring tide, and it was here to stay.